Yahweh Shemel Shah, Barakatah Yahweh Shah, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shah.
A transfer of rulership is coming, and the kingdom of heaven will be on earth. Righteousness will be spread throughout the whole four corners of the earth. Wickedness will be put down. According to the Holy Scriptures, Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High, is set to bring immortality to the nation of Israel, the elect, via establishing the tabernacle of David, as we talk about the second coming of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. He is coming to take down this current world ruled by Esau, Edom, and establish a righteous kingdom, which is synonymous with the throne of David. That's scriptural, which is a government that's going to run this world in righteousness.
But now is risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order, the first fruits, afterward they that are at his coming. Then cometh the end, when he shall have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father, when he shall have put down all rule and all authority and power. For he must reign till he hath put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death, for he hath put all things under his feet. But when he saith all things are put under him, it is manifest that he is accepted which did put all things under him. And when all things shall be subdued unto him, then shall the Son also himself be subject unto him that put all things under him, that God may be all in all.
Eternal life. That's what's promised to the elect. All right, all Israel, but it starts with the elect. And that's how the earth will be governed by immortals, perfect angelic forces who are going to come down and rule on earth. Extraterrestrial bodies will be able to do things that humans do, but in heavenly bodies. Like eating, drinking. Did not Yahweh Shai say he's going to drink wine with us in the kingdom? Well, how do you drink wine with a spiritual body? Well, we're going to have out of this world capabilities in those new bodies.
The gods of the earth are coming.
Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai.
We must appease them or face their wrath.
The heat is unbearable today.
Don't speak of the elect, they might hear.
All right. Shalom.
Shalom.
First and foremost, we would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shah, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shah. All right. So what we want to do, in the spirit, all right, with the brother GMS Mississippi camp, all right, and what we want to go into in the spirit is dealing with, the statue of empires, okay, that was given to Nebuchadnezzar in a dream and was broken down by Daniel, all right, in the second chapter, and those empires, also are visions given to Daniel in the seventh chapter, so we'll be going back and forth between the two chapters as we go through this statue, okay, and we're going to deal with, an empire at a time, All right, and we're gonna, go into the Assyrian Babylonian Empire, okay, which is that golden head, okay. So we're gonna go into some precepts. We have a few videos to go into to get some history, and Lord will you brothers, all right, and you sisters are edified, all right. So you can go into that Psalm 75.
Con. This is the book of Psalms. This is the book of Psalms, chapter 75, starting at verse 4. It says, I said unto the fools, deal not foolishly, and to the wicked lift not up the horn.
Yeah, so when you go into the scriptures, okay, you have to understand, when it's speaking about the fools, okay, well, mainly when you go into it, it's speaking of Esau, Edom, okay, but this can be likened to all the heathens that have ever came into power, because these heathens, they go through the same cycle. The Lord lifts them up, put them in power, they reign, become an empire, and they become proud, okay, to where these different kings, they think they're guys, and all these different things, and the Lord, all right, will have to intervene, okay, and just as he put them in power, he will remove them from power, okay. So keep reading, bro.
Come, verse 5. It says, lift not up your horn on high, speak not with a stiff neck.
We'll speak not with a stiff neck, okay. And see, that's just like Pharaoh, the Lord hardened his heart. It's like a stiff mind, stiff neck is like in someone that's stubborn, okay, regardless of the warnings, because you have prophets that will be raised up in all these kingdoms, okay, that we're going to go into, okay. But what will happen? They will all get a stiff neck. They will all, become hardened towards Yahweh Bashim al Shah, become very proud, okay. And the Lord will show just as he put them in power, he can take them out of power, okay. Go ahead.
Come, verse 6. It says, for promotion cometh neither, for promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. But
okay.
Go ahead.
And it's letting you know, it's naming those directions to let you know promotion doesn't come from within the earth, okay. It doesn't matter about who has the best generals, okay, who has the most money, okay. It doesn't matter about who has the best fighters, all right, the most horses, okay, or in this time the most technology. No, it's about whom the Lord has ordained to be in rulership and who the Lord has ordained to remove from power. That's what it all boils down to, because we get into the specifics, dealing with these kingdoms going in and out of power, but ultimately this is just, we're just going into the details of the will of the Lord, okay. So none of these heathens have a boast, okay. It's all the will of Yahweh Bashim al Shah. We don't have the boast, we don't even have nothing. We didn't have no part in the process of being the chosen people. That was the Lord's good will, and that's why we should just be extremely appreciative, man. You see? Go ahead.
Come. Verse 7. It says, but the Most High is the judge. He put it down one and set it up another.
Yeah, so the Lord, he put it down one and set up another, man. The Lord changed empire like we change shoes, man. Okay? That's how the Lord changed the empire, man. Okay? But changing them shoes, what it is a process. You see, even if you change your pair of shoes, well, it's a process of coming out those shoes and putting some more on. Well, that's how the Lord, he'll do the earth like that. He'll change, because whoever's in power, their influence, and their style influences the earth. Okay, that's why even today, you might have something like Roman style curtains. Okay, well, when did those curtains become popular? When the Romans was in style. Okay, you see, French, French architect. You see, a British house, whatever. Okay, well, when do these things, a Victorian house, I think they go back to the British. You see, because when you're in power, guess what? Your style your influence, okay, is in the earth. It covers the earth. Okay, just like when King Solomon was in power, it said his parables, covered the earth. His influence. Okay, so the Most High, He put his one down, all right, and bring him up another one. And see, this is just the latest example of that what we're about to see with Esau Edom. Okay, he's just the last heathen that the Lord's finna put down, and He's gonna put Israel up for good. Okay, which we'll get into that towards the end. But we want to go into, matter of fact, let's read that Daniel 2 and 31. Let's read that Daniel 2 and 31. And then we'll get that video.
This is the book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 31.
Yep.
Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image.
Yep.
This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible.
Yep. And so this is the image of these heathen empires. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 32. It says, this image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass.
Yeah, so the image head was of fine gold, and it's likened it to the Assyrian Babylonian Empire. Okay, now we're going to go into, the transition, all right, from the Assyrians to the Babylonians, all right, and the Babylonians emerged from amongst, all right, the Assyrians. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar, those who are Assyrians that emerged, all right, to power is a sect of the Assyrians called the Chaldeans. Babylonian was the religious capital, because even when the Assyrians were in power, they still reverence, Babylon is the religious capital, a lot of those rituals and, the gods of the Assyrian Empire, well, they was of the Babylonians. Okay, so let's get that first video. Like I said, we'll play about 11 minutes and just be prepared to stop it at certain points, Papa Shah.
I got you, bro.
You got it, bro.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of History with Sai. We've come a long way, from the city of Babylon's early beginnings to its first real period of greatness under Hammurabi, followed by the relatively stable and prosperous Kassite period, which later led to over a century of Assyrian rule. Now, we come to the really short, though arguably most famous period in Babylonian history, that of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. If you've seen or even listened to a handful of programs on this channel, especially those focused on the history of ancient Mesopotamia and the Levant past the Mid-Bronze Age, then you've no doubt heard of the Assyrians. We've encountered them several times in the history of the region from around 2000 BCE onward. By the early Iron Age, they had established what scholars call the Neo-Assyrian Empire and ruled unchallenged across the Fertile Crescent for several centuries.
Construction workers just don't like paperwork. They're right. With Connect Team's employee management platform, you can get
what we call the Neo-Assyrian period kicked off around 911 BCE. Between the years 745 to about 650 BCE, Assyria was at its height and firmly entrenched in Babylonia, the land to its south. Though there were several periods of rebellion, the Assyrians were always able to smash any dissent and rule the country, either directly or through proxies and puppet rulers. Unfortunately, establishing such control at times also resulted in the city of Babylon being destroyed and having to be rebuilt on several occasions. The last great king of Assyria, Ashurbanipal, died around the year 630 BCE, which left the Assyrian Empire in the hands of his young heir, Ashur-etil-ilani. Too young to rule on his own, for a while, the chief eunuch, who was not a member of the royal family, took over as regent before usurping the throne for himself around 626 or 625 BCE. He, though, only lasted for a few months before being replaced by Sin-shara-ishkun, another one of Ashurbanipal's sons. By then, though, the apparent weakness and instability within Assyria's ruling house had taken its toll on many parts of the empire. In 627 BCE, Assyria's puppet ruler in Babylon, Kandalanu, died, leaving the Babylonian throne unoccupied. Babylonian Chronicle 21 states that for 1 year there was no king in the country, after which a new ruler by the name of Nabu-apla-usar, better known to us as Nabopolassar, started his reign on the 26th day of the month Arasamnu, which on the Western Gregorian calendar would have fallen on November 23rd, 626 BCE. Obviously, the Assyrian king at the time, Sin-shara-ishkun, didn't recognize Nabopolassar and chased him south all the way to the city of Uruk. Many believe that Nabopolassar's family may have actually been from there, and so the city, which was in the Sealand province and a Chaldean stronghold, would have provided the new king with some shelter and protection against his Assyrian adversaries. For a few years, the two sides seemed to have battled over the city before at last Nabopolassar could claim a final victory there. By 620 BCE, it appears that he was in control of most, if not all, of Babylonia, including the holy city of Nippur. This, though, didn't necessarily mean that Babylon and Babylonia were safe. While the Assyrians had been weakened, centuries of conflict between the two great rivals had shown that a resurgent Assyria could return at any time. One only had to look at the last century for examples of Assyria's vengeance on Babylon. The most notable instances, just in recent memory, being Sennacherib's destruction of the city around 681 BCE, as well as Ashurbanipal's conquest a few decades later in a civil war against his brother, Shamash Shumuukin.
Customer Appreciation Week begins September 24th through September 30th. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
There was little that Nabopolassar could actually do. This was the Assyrian Empire we're talking about, the most powerful state in the known world at the time, that stretched from the Zagros Mountains in the east to the shores of Egypt and the Mediterranean.
Pause it real quick, bro.
Thinking that he could forever
Yeah, so just real quick. All right, so what we're seeing now, Nabopolassar, which was the father of Nebuchadnezzar, now they're beginning to overthrow, Assyrian rule in Babylon, and they're beginning to consume the Assyrian Empire onto Babylon. Okay, so and it's going to break down when you go into Daniel the 7th chapter. But this is what we're seeing. All right, the beginning of the fall of the Assyrian Empire. They reign, for a few centuries, and then you will have, the Babylonians, that will conquer them, showing you that you see their little piece of land that Nabopolassar started with. Okay, he was able to do what? To consume this large empire, coming from this little piece of land. All right, which shows you that what, man, it's all the will of Yahweh B'Shem Al-Shai. Matter of fact, get that brother Damawati precept, and then we'll go back to the video. GMS in his likeness, that first one, Sirach 10 and 5.
You on verse 4 first, bro? Or just 5?
4, that's what I meant to say, verse 4. Yeah, just read 4 about so.
Con, this is GMS and this GMS in his likeness. This is the book of Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, chapter 10, verse 4. The power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Al-Shai, and in due time he will set up. It's like he will set over it one that is profitable.
Yep. So the power of the hand is in, all right, the power of the earth is in the hand of the Lord. Okay. And he's been shuffling all these heathen kingdoms in and out of power. Okay. And now he's getting to the point where he's finna shuffle, okay, his son, Yahweh Shai, in the power. Okay. And the joint heirs, their government, the first fruits, along with the elect. Okay, it's going to be that ruling class in the earth, man. Okay, so as we can see how easy it is for the Lord to shuffle, what we're gonna be going through these series, because this is I say part 1, Lord willing, of a 4-part series. But what we're seeing is these heathen powers being shuffled by the Most High for the sake of prophecy, man. And this is just showing that He is. Okay. But you can go back to the video, bro Bible Shop.
Come.
dislodge his northern neighbor from the scene was wishful thinking at best. It just so happened, though, that unlikely allies appeared when least expected. These were the Medes, an Iranian people who occupied large parts of the Zagros Mountains, as well as the western Iranian plateau. The two regional powers eventually struck a deal with the clear objective of eliminating Assyrian influence from the region once and for all. Heavy fighting between the Babylonians and the Assyrians started in 616 BCE. The Babylonians were eventually able to advance all the way to the region of Arapa and then lay siege to the great city of Ashur in the heart of Assyria. The Assyrians, though, counterattacked and pushed the Babylonian forces back to what is today the area of Tikrit in Iraq. It was at this point that the Medes entered the scene. They also fought their way into the region of Arapa and advanced to the city of Ashur in 614 BCE. This time, though, the city fell, with the Medes completely razing it to the ground. Shortly after this event, Nabopolassar and the main Babylonian army arrived at Ashur, where he met the Median king, Sayachares, face to face. There, the two kings made a formal alliance before heading their separate ways. They met again in the summer of 612 BCE, when the Babylonians and Medes joined forces to take out the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, at that time perhaps the most beautiful and wealthy city in the world. After a 3-month siege, it fell, along with the Assyrian king, Sin-shara-ishkun. Despite losing the major centers of their homeland, the remnants of the Assyrian Empire fought on in the west. The new and soon-to-be last Assyrian king, Ashur-uballit II, reorganized what was left of his forces at the cities of Carchemish and Haran, sites today located in northern Syria. With his Egyptian allies, the Assyrians fought hard, but eventually lost.
Hey, real quick, just to show you, the accuracy of prophecy, get the book of Tobit, chapter 14, verses 14. All right, the point gonna be in 15. Okay, so what we're seeing now is the Medes. Okay, they made an alliance with the Babylonians to take down the Assyrians. Okay, which the Medes are going to play a part in taking down the Babylonians. We'll get into that and just show you how all these things were interconnected. Daniel chapter 2, that statue, it's just a string of empires back to back to back, and then you get, into this time that we in now, Jacob holding Esau's heel, that shows that the Lord's going to run these kingdoms back to back. That's why the Lord is raising us up in the midst, of Esau falling, and we're being raised up, The Babylonians was raised up in the midst of the Assyrians falling, The Medes and the Persians, they was raised up in the midst of the Babylonians falling, The Greeks was raised up in the midst of the Persians falling, The Romans in the midst of the Greeks falling, that was being raised up. So the Lord had these empires running back to back to back, and so the empire of Esau transitioning to Jacob is going to be back to back. You see? But you got it, bro.
Con, this is the book of Tobit, chapter 14. You said verse 15, right, bro?
Start at 14, then read to 15.
Con, this is the book of Tobit, chapter 14, starting at verse 14. It says, and he died at Ecbatane.
Yeah, Ecbatane, which is modern day Iran. Go ahead.
Con, it says in Media.
Yep.
Being 107 and 20 years old.
Yeah, so that was speaking of Tobit. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 15. Before he died, he heard of the destruction of Nineveh.
Yeah,
which
Nineveh.
Was, go ahead.
Yep, Nineveh. Go ahead.
Nineveh, the water, which was taken by Nebuchadnezzar and Assyrius.
Yep.
And before his death, he rejoiced over Nineveh.
Yep. So the Lord prophesied the downfall of Nineveh through Jonah. All right, and Jonah didn't see it in his time, but in the book of Tobit, the downfall of Nineveh is recorded. Okay, shows you what the accuracy of prophecy, man. Okay, this is a living book. The Bible is undefeated. Okay, you got it, bro. Go back to the video.
Come.
The Babylonian Median coalition. And with the fall of Haran in 610 BCE, what was left of the Assyrian Empire was wiped off the map forever. The fall of Assyria, for most in the ancient Near East, would have been unimaginable just a generation before. When it fell, few mourned its passing, though many sought to pick up the pieces of what was left.
Pause it real quick, bro.
After the fall of Haran,
hey, go back to that picture, that statue. Yeah, so you see, you know that that it looked like a lion with wings, but it had what, a man's head. Okay, which we just said we're gonna get there. So I just wanted to show that picture. Okay, this was a Syrian symbol. All right, so he looked like a lion's body. All right, with eagle's wings. All right, but a man's head. You know, and that's exactly, you know, the prophecy, you know, spoke about in Daniel, which we're gonna get it when we get into Daniel. But just wanted to put that on the mind. All right, on your brother's mind. All right, as we're going through this. All right, so we're gonna go into this image, you know, in the book of Daniel. You know, but you got it, bro.
pick up the pieces of what was left of its once great empire. After the fall of Haran, Nabopolassar campaigned in the Levant around Carchemish.
My mentor told me to be more like Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, well, he had an empire. I have a Gmail,
which the Egyptians also sought to control. In 605 BCE, his son, Crown Prince Nebuchadnezzar, won a decisive battle against the Egyptians that allowed Babylon to essentially move forward in its control of the entire Levant. Shortly after this, Nabopolassar died, and the crown prince was coronated as Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon.
Yeah, so you can.
Though Nabopolassar was
So that was the transition from the Assyrians, you know, to the Babylonians. All right, and it made it to the point of Nebuchadnezzar, okay, becoming the king. All right, after his father, all right, Nabopolassar, which he was a crown prince, you know, during the time of the fall of Nineveh. Okay, now let's get Daniel 7:1. And then we'll go into the next video just dealing with Nebuchadnezzar and kind of expound on, you know, the book of Daniel. All right, you got it, bro.
God, this is Daniel chapter 7 and verse 1. It says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed.
Yo, so now Daniel's finna get visions, you know, about these same empires from Daniel, the second chapter. Now the Lord's gonna give him visions directly, and it's gonna go a little more in depth, you know, when you go into it. Go ahead.
God. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by the night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove above the great sea.
Mm-hmm.
And the four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another.
Yeah, and the sea represents the people, you know. So these empires would emerge from amongst what the people in the earth. Okay, go ahead.
Verse 4. It says, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked.
Yeah, so it was like a lion and it had eagle's wings. Okay, going into the Assyrian Babylonian Empire. All right, and those wings represent the Assyrian Empire, and it said those wings were plucked, okay, because Nabopolassar, all right, the father of Nebuchadnezzar, what did he do? He overthrew, all right, the overlords of the Assyrians, all right, from off the Babylonians, okay, because the Babylonians were what? They were subjugated for the Assyrians, but Nabopolassar, he overthrew those Assyrian overlords, okay. He was plucking off those wings, ultimately the Lord plucking those wings off. Go ahead.
Come. It says, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it.
Yeah, so it stood up on his feet, and that was the era of Nebuchadnezzar, because under Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian Empire, Babylonia was solidified as an empire in the earth, as a superpower, okay, under Nebuchadnezzar, okay? He was the longest, king to rule, in Babylon, okay, and he was stated the most powerful, you see? And there was a Lord that raised him up, all right? So the Lord used his father, Nabopolassar, to overthrow, pluck off the wings of Assyria, and Nebuchadnezzar, okay, made the Babylonian Empire to stand in the earth, okay, to stand out, amongst, the other kingdoms of the earth and become an empire, okay, because you're an empire when you have other kings under your authority, okay, and there was Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. So now we can segue to that video. You want to see why Nebuchadnezzar was so proud, not understanding that he was a tool being used by the Lord. Go ahead to fulfill prophecy. You got it, bro.
Come, you want to segue to the second?
Yeah, go ahead to the second video.
Come.
Just imagine a king whose power was so immense that his fury spread throughout the Middle East, and whose military achievements changed the course of history to such an extent that they are still remembered today. Nebuchadnezzar II, who lived 600 years before Christ, was one of Babylon's most powerful rulers, and is best remembered for his conquest of the kingdom of Judah and the first destruction of the city of Jerusalem. Ancient writings claim that Nebuchadnezzar II was the eldest son of Nabopolassar, a former Babylonian general, who fought to free Babylon from Assyrian rule. The Neo-Babylonian Empire was established as a result of a rebellion led by Nebuchadnezzar's father, and later by the war against the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which freed Babylon after almost a century of slavery. In 646 BC, Nabopolassar became king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and vanquished the Assyrians outside Babylon. With time, the Assyrians were expelled from Lower Mesopotamia.
Big news here from the New York Stock Exchange.
Until the conflict moved to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the center of the Assyrian Empire. In 632 BC, the Chaldean Empire invaded and took Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. The Assyrian army fled to Haran, a place where Nabopolassar and his troops invaded and stormed. Ashur-uballit, king of the Assyrian Empire at the time, fled to Egypt, but his attempt to retake Haran ended in failure, leading to the collapse of the Assyrian Empire. From that point on, Nabopolassar headed the Chaldean dynasty of Babylon. In 624 BC, with his death, Nebuchadnezzar took the throne and immediately launched several changes that transformed Babylon into the most feared empire at the time. His first great duty as king was to follow on from his father's work, to expand and consolidate Babylon's power. He knew that, to maintain control, he had to display strength, and above all, be ruthless with his opponents. The first raids to grow the Babylonian Empire were to plunder. Nebuchadnezzar's first targets were Gaza, Ashkelon, and some Anatolian cities. As Babylon grew wealthier, Nebuchadnezzar also invested in building and upgrading the city's structure. He built walls, water supply pipelines, cobbled the streets, and also built what is known as the great symbol of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the Hanging Gardens, a work that has been considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But to sustain all these developments and expansion, looting the small towns of Anatolia was not enough. He had to focus on the major targets. The first major onslaught was approaching, and it would be against Jerusalem. But before that, there was a small setback along the way, and Nebuchadnezzar had to deploy his efforts and his troops against an Assyrian uprising that had joined forces with the Egyptians to recapture Babylon. They encountered each other in a grueling war that became known as the Battle of Carchemish. In 624 BC, he resumed a war that had previously been fought by his father. Nebuchadnezzar headed his forces against the Egyptian armies, which were allied with the remaining troops of the ancient Assyrian Empire. Led by Pharaoh Necho II, the Egyptians thought they could take on Babylon, but they underestimated Nebuchadnezzar's military prowess. Also, the pharaoh was at a disadvantage because before the confrontation at Carchemish, the Jewish king Josiah performed a crucial role in delaying and inflicting significant damage on Necho II's army. Josiah, by intercepting the Egyptians at Megiddo, although defeated and killed in battle, managed to enfeeble and delay Necho's forces, providing Nebuchadnezzar with a vital advantage. The battle was fierce. The previous wearing down of the Egyptian forces and Nebuchadnezzar's ingenious strategy resulted in a definitive defeat of the Egyptian army. The Babylonian victory not only solidified Nebuchadnezzar's rule over the region, but also sealed the end of Egyptian influence in the Near East. This was when Nebuchadnezzar firmly established himself as the greatest military leader of that time. At the end of the battle, Nebuchadnezzar not only smashed his enemies, but also sent a clear message. Babylon was in command and was ready to subdue everything from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. However, to rule this entire region, he would have to backtrack and focus on a major political opponent. He needed to conquer Jerusalem. And this was one of the most vividly remembered episodes of Nebuchadnezzar's history. Judah was among the kingdoms under his authority, ruled by King Jehoiakim. And yet, the Babylonian presence in the region was constantly defied by mutinies and insurrections, often encouraged by pledges of support from other regional powers. Around 621 BC, Jehoiakim openly challenged Babylonian authority. Nebuchadnezzar marched his army into the city. His response to Jehoiakim's rebellion was prompt and ruthless. The Babylonian king sent forces to quash the insurrection and reassert his control over Judah. In 618 BC, following a prolonged siege, Jerusalem was captured. Jehoiakim was overthrown and replaced by his son Jeconiah, who was also quickly ousted in favor of Zedekiah, a ruler more sympathetic to Babylonian interests. But Nebuchadnezzar was not pleased. In 609 BC, Zedekiah boldly decided to stop paying tribute to him, a defiant stance that was emulated by the king of Tyre. This uprising was not only driven by the yearning for autonomy, but also by the expected support of Egypt, which was still trying to regain its sway in the region. In 607 BC, Nebuchadnezzar returned to conclude the affair. Jerusalem was once again ravaged, but this time, the Babylonian exile became an even darker reality for the Jewish people. Entire families were snatched from their homes and taken to Babylon on a suffering and desperate journey. Nebuchadnezzar raided the city, destroying everything in his path. Solomon's temple was reduced to ashes. For the Jews, that day was like an apocalyptic vision. Walls crumbling, fiery embers rising into the sky, and a significant part of their people being dragged into Babylonian exile. This conquest was not only a battlefield victory, but also a lasting mark on the Jewish people's history and culture, described in several biblical books. This event is known as the Babylonian captivity. Once Nebuchadnezzar had secured his power with the conquest of Jerusalem, he kept going. He expanded his empire through a series of ruthless military campaigns throughout the Levant region of Mesopotamia. He also resumed raiding and pillaging in Anatolia and attacked some tribes in the Arabian desert. One of the most remarkable campaigns was against the kingdom of Tyre, a powerful Phoenician city-state lying on the east coast of the Mediterranean Sea, in what is now Lebanon. In 606 BC, Nebuchadnezzar sieged Tyre for almost 13 years. The ancient city on the Lebanese coast was known for its intimidating fortifications and maritime trade routes, which made its conquest a challenge to be beaten, and one that would prove crucial to the expanding Babylonian Empire. The kingdom of Elam, to the east of Babylon in present-day Iran, was another important target. Nebuchadnezzar led several sweeping attacks on the Elamite cities, destroying their capital, Shushan, and entrenching Babylonian control over the region. This campaign not only widened the empire's borders, but also assured access to valuable resources and pivotal trade routes. Besides the external campaigns, Nebuchadnezzar also sought to consolidate the empire's internal control. He bolstered the city's defenses, built new fortifications, and tightened up the central administration. As mentioned earlier, of all the magnificent architectural works that made Babylon the crown jewel of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are certainly the most remembered, having been named one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
These gardens, apart from being a symbol of beauty, were also a representation of Nebuchadnezzar's power and technological proficiency. Presumably, Nebuchadnezzar had these gardens built for his wife, Amytis, who missed the green mountains of her homeland. Amytis of Media was a princess from the region in the northwest of present-day Iran. Media was an influential kingdom in ancient Persia, known for its breathtaking landscapes. Nebuchadnezzar built the gardens to make his subjects and visitors nostalgic, proving to everyone that the power of Babylon had no limits. But the Hanging Gardens were just one aspect of Nebuchadnezzar's enormous construction undertaking. The Great Walls and the Ishtar Gate also stood for Babylon's greatness. He too built that famous wall, which was a colossal structure that surrounded the city and made Babylon an even safer territory. These walls were so dense that, according to reports, 2 chariots could run side by side over them. Right at the heart of these walls was the majestic Ishtar Gate, a true masterpiece of Babylonian architecture and art. It was clad in enameled bricks of a vibrant blue and decorated with high-relief images of dragons and bulls. The conquering armies of Nebuchadnezzar paraded through this gate with the fruits of their triumphs. In Babylon's religious center, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the rebuilding of the Esagala, the grand temple dedicated to Marduk, the city's main god. This was not just a place of worship, but also a symbol of the king's divine power, as he saw himself as the representative of the gods on earth. Yet another of Nebuchadnezzar II's great works was the reconstruction of the Tabernacle Ziggurat. Standing some 91 meters high, it dominated the city's skyline and was visible from dozens of kilometers away. Then in 582, Nebuchadnezzar's reign came to an end with his death. He ruled for 43 years and was succeeded by his son Amel-Marduk. Nebuchadnezzar II's tenure is remembered as one of the most significant in Babylonian history. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, so you can see why the devil, this heathen, all right, Nebuchadnezzar was so proud. The Lord just had it to where he was kicking everybody's ass, man, and he was building, he had this splendor, the glory of his, infrastructure, his architecture, the Hanging Gardens, he just had, military might, he had the wealth. Okay, he was a general himself, because his father, was a general. So the devil, became extremely proud. All right, and he didn't, give reverence. He stopped giving reverence. Okay, to the Lord, which all these heathens do that. They have their gods. Okay, but Daniel, that's why the book of Daniel is so interesting. Remember, Daniel, is like the hand of a king. The counsel of a king in these times, and this was the empire that Daniel was, high up in, showing you that, Jake, lead a troop for, a job, a woman, but then you did not have what Daniel had, like Daniel was high up there. They just show you how high up Daniel was too, that's another subject, but, let's go to the book. Let me see. I know it's one. But let's go to I think it's in Jeremiah. My brothers used to get that all the time. Let's go to Jeremiah 4 and 7. All right, because we use this now to speak about Yahushua, because now he's that lion that's finna destroy the Gentiles. But ultimately, this was speaking of when it's first, to qualify this is speaking of Nebuchadnezzar, and this is what the Lord assigned him to do. You see, the Lord assigned him, to be this conquering king. Go ahead.
Gun, this is Jeremiah chapter 4 and verse 7. It says, the lion is come up from his thicket, and the destroyer of the Gentiles is on his way. He is gone forth from his place to make thy land desolate, and thy city shall be laid waste without an inhabitant.
Yeah, so Nebuchadnezzar, he was laying shit down. As he wasn't playing, but it was the Lord, all right, that was on him. And that's why the Lord showed him that it was him, all right, by turning him into a beast. Okay. And right before he got turned to the beast, that's when he was at the peak of his pride. So let's get that in Daniel chapter 4, all right, towards the end. Because now after you see that video, now you can visualize this. You should be able to visualize this precept that we finna get. Okay. Well, yeah, Jake, Nebuchadnezzar had Babylon lit. Like it was grand. It was grandiose. Okay. Let's get that Daniel 4. I just had this towards the end. Hold on. Something like it, bro.
Oh, good.
I had Jeremiah 4. Give me a second. So yeah, you get Daniel 4 and start at 28.
Gun, this is Daniel chapter 4, verse 28. It says, all this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. It says, at the end of 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 30. The king spake and said, is not this great Babylon?
So pretty much he was like on a rooftop, because it said like 12 months later he was taking a walk on a flat roof of the royal palace of Babylon. So he pretty much on the rooftop of his palace. And the view was crazy, and you gotta think, man, those kingdoms back then, especially in the Mesopotamia, you can just think of the we haven't seen landscaping. We haven't seen landscaping. You can imagine the landscaping of that kingdom. You can imagine the architecture of that kingdom, okay, of the city of Babylon. So he's on the rooftop looking out. Remember, he done went to wars. Like Nebuchadnezzar, he was in the trenches. He wasn't like a lot of Roman Caesars, tucked off in the cut. No, he was in the trenches, so he's looking out. And he went a 13-year siege. Do you know how much resources it takes to do a 13-year siege on the city, man? So he was out there in the trenches. So he, take a breath and kind of look at everything that he's done accomplished, and this is what he's gonna go into. Go ahead.
Gone. Verse 30, Salakia. It says, the king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?
Yeah, so it was all him, all him. You see, and as soon as he said it, go ahead.
God. Verse 31. While the word was in the king's mouth,
before he finished. All right, go ahead.
It says, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee.
Out of there, snatch. Turned that boy to a Wolverine. That niggas out there, nails long, on all four. Okay, and that was just the power of the Lord. You can read that chapter 5, on your own time. Y'all can read that. But the Lord had them out there, hairy, eating out, just eating as a beast, man. So he was like that for years. And then the Lord put him back on the throne like it wasn't nothing. And that just shows you that it's the will of Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Okay. And Yeah, we can just go into before pride is destruction. You know, matter of fact, let's get that in Jeremiah 50 and verse 31. And we can end on that. You know, we'll save that for another lesson. What you got, bro?
Come. This is Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 31. It says, Behold, I am against thee, thou, O thou most proud, saith the Lord, Yahweh Shema Shai, power of hosts. It says, For thy day is come, the time I will visit thee.
Yep, and this is talking about, all right, Babylon the Great, which is America. Okay, Babylon the Great, which is America, man. All right, so the Lord's going to visit the most proud. All right, and he's going to visit it in complete destruction. All right, America is going to be burned to ashes. You see? So, yeah, man. So that's the first of the series of the Assyrian Babylonian Empire. You know, the head of gold. You know, Lord will. You know, we can keep it going through these other empires. You know, just bringing understanding of the Lord's prophecies. You know, how he transitioned kingdom. You know, so with that, you know, we pray that you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified once again. I'm gonna give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Kakwadash, and double honors to the elders and apostles, you know, who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers, man, and peace and blessing salutations to the hopeful. Shalom.
Shalom.